For millennia, the Galactic Concordance had been built upon a foundation of absolute, unyielding truth. Their civilizations, vastly ancient and infinitely complex, operated under a singular, unbreakable tenet: Omni-Veritas. Every language in the Concordance, every form of communication, every social interaction was predicated on the immediate and unfiltered conveyance of factual information. There was no capacity for deception, no subtext, no polite omission, no euphemism. Even unintentional misstatements were met with immediate, direct correction, often causing deep social embarrassment or worse, accusation of deliberate falsehood. The Lumina, beings of pure light, communicated through resonant frequency, shifts that inherently conveyed their precise thoughts and intentions. The Chronos, a species that perceived time in all directions simultaneously, found the very concept of a past event being presented inaccurately to be an affront to the fabric of causality. The Vespida, a hive mind collective, shared a communal truth, making individual deception impossible. This principle of Omni-Veritas had forged a brutal yet stable peace. Wars, when they erupted, were fought with devastating honesty. Declarations of intent were precise, tactical movements were openly broadcast, though often too fast to react to, and surrender was unambiguous. Their societies, devoid of hidden agendas or political machinations, were marvels of efficiency, if somewhat emotionally barren. Humanity's introduction to this galactic stage had been predictably disastrous. Our early diplomatic efforts were met with utter bewilderment, then outrage. A human ambassador, attempting to politely decline an offer of unsuitable cultural exchange by saying, "That's a very interesting proposition, we'll consider it," was instantly flagged for deceptive ambiguity. A casual compliment like, "That's a lovely cloak," to a Vespida, whose fashion was dictated by pure utility, was perceived as a direct falsehood, as the cloak was merely functional. We were deemed the deceivers, a species inherently untrustworthy. Our very language and social customs riddled with baffling layers of hidden meaning and blatant untruths. Our admission into the Concordance was provisional, our presence tolerated only due to our aggressive expansion and surprisingly effective, if chaotic, military. We were kept on the fringes, politely and truthfully informed that our unnatural communication styles made us a potential threat to galactic stability. Then came the crisis of the Xylos. The Xylos were a newly discovered species, hailing from a vibrant, bioluminescent forest world on the galactic rim. They were a deeply spiritual people, their entire culture revolving around a sacred, ancient prophecy known as the Verdant Reckoning. Their society was harmonious, guided by the wisdom of their elder trees and the intricate cycles of their world. But they were also incredibly sensitive, their emotional state tied directly to their environment, their social cohesion dependent on the nuanced interpretations of their prophecy. The Concordance, in its brutal honesty, had attempted to integrate the Xylos. A routine geological survey, conducted by Lumina scientists, had revealed that the Xylos' elder trees, which they believed held ancestral spirits, were in fact massive, slow-growing fungal organisms, their bioluminescence a result of symbiotic bacteria, not divine energy. The Lumina, seeing no reason to withhold factual data, had truthfully reported this to the Xylos. The Xylos were devastated. The Verdant Reckoning was predicated on the spiritual sentience of the elder trees. To learn they were mere fungi, however ancient, shattered their entire belief system. Worse, the Concordance, in its attempts to re-educate the Xylos with correct information, only deepened the wound. A Chronos diplomat, trying to explain the fungal biology, truthfully but bluntly stated, "Your entire spiritual framework is a biological fallacy." The Xylos, a peaceful species, reacted with unimaginable fury. Their spiritual collapse translated into an emotional meltdown. They believed they had been mocked, their faith deliberately desecrated. They interpreted the Concordance's unyielding truth as a calculated, malicious insult. They declared a holy war of verdant retribution against the Concordance, their ancient, peaceful energy weapons suddenly repurposed for devastating effect. Billions of lives were at stake. The Concordance, masters of logic and truth, had no idea how to pacify a species that was literally dying of a broken heart. Ambassador Alistair Finch was a man who understood the intricate dance of human language, like a maestro conducting an orchestra. His career as a human diplomat to the Concordance had been an exercise in constant, polite frustration. He'd spent years explaining the nuances of sarcasm, irony, exaggeration, and most frequently, the white lie. His efforts were usually met with the blank, honest stares of alien delegates who saw only deliberate deceit. But now, the Concordance was desperate. The Xylos, enraged by unvarnished truth, were mobilizing. Their ancient energy weapons, designed to protect their delicate ecosystem, were surprisingly effective against Concordance shields. The Concordance could devastate the Xylos, but at an astronomical cost in lives and resources. More importantly, they couldn't understand why the Xylos were so angry. They had merely presented facts, a Lumina delegate, its light form flickering, with something akin to desperation, finally approached Finch. Ambassador Finch, your species has a unique capacity to present information that is not entirely factually correct for social cohesion, to smooth over truths. We refer to it as benevolent untruth. Is this a correct assessment? Finch, a slight smile playing on his lips, replied, "We call them white lies or diplomacy. And yes, it's a core part of how we manage to live with each other without constantly offending everyone." Could this white lie be deployed to avert the Xylos crisis? Project Nightingale, as it was grimly named after the bird known for its beautiful, deceptive song, was initiated. Finch was put in charge. His mission: teach the Concordance, and by extension, the Xylos, the value of a well-intentioned lie. He was to save billions of lives by convincing two cultures that what they thought they heard isn't quite what was meant. Finch assembled his team: Dr. Lena Petrova, a xenolinguist whose entire career had been dedicated to mapping the labyrinthine intricacies of human communication; Commander Jax, a former military strategist with a surprising knack for social psychology; and a small, diverse team of human, cultural experts. Their first task was to explain the concept of a white lie to the Concordance. Finch began with a simple example. If a friend asks if you like their new, truly awful haircut and you say, "It's distinctive," you're not directly lying, but you're also not saying, "It's terrible." You're preserving their feelings. The Lumina delegate, its light shimmering in confusion, projected, "But the haircut is objectively terrible. To state distinctive is to misrepresent reality." This creates a flawed database of information for the friend, but it preserves the friendship, Dr. Petrova interjected patiently. It prioritizes social harmony over raw, unvarnished fact, and sometimes that harmony is more important. The Concordance found this concept agonizingly inefficient, even dangerous. But faced with galactic war, they listened. Finch knew his real challenge wasn't just convincing the Concordance to use white lies, it was convincing the Xylos to accept them. The negotiator, Finch's human diplomatic vessel, approached Xylo space. The atmosphere was thick with resentment and raw spiritual pain. The Xylos were a species literally dying of a broken heart, their collective despair manifesting as a wilting blight across their homeworld's bioluminescent forests. Finch's team had been studying the Xylos' verdant reckoning prophecy meticulously. They discovered that while the Concordance had presented a brutal scientific truth about the elder trees being fungal, the Xylos interpreted this as a deliberate act of spiritual desecration. Their prophecy was not just about the biology of the trees, but about their role as conduits for ancestral wisdom. Finch initiated first contact, not with a logical argument, but with a carefully constructed narrative. He used subtle omission, strategic ambiguity, and recontextualization, concepts utterly alien to Concordance diplomacy. "Honored Xylo's elders," Finch began, his voice calm, projected in their own language by Dr. Petrova's intricate linguistic algorithms. "The Concordance has caused you profound pain. They showed you the branches of a truth, but not the roots of its meaning. The elder trees are living organisms, deeply intertwined with the very essence of your world. Their connection to ancestral wisdom is not negated by their biological form. It is amplified by it. For what is more sacred than the living conduit of life itself? Constantly renewing, constantly growing, constantly bearing the legacy of all that came before." He wasn't lying. Not really. He was simply reframing the truth, shifting the emphasis. From fungi to living conduit, from biological fallacy to amplified legacy. It was a delicate, dangerous dance. The Xylo's elders, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with raw grief, slowly absorbed his words. "But the elder trees, they are not spirits. They are fungi." The Concordance stated this as immutable fact. "And a fungus is a marvel of life, is it not?" Finch countered quickly. "It connects the roots of all life beneath the soil. It is a vast unseen network sharing nutrients, supporting the mighty forest. Could it not be that your ancestors chose the most interconnected, the most enduring, the most self-renewing form of life to house their wisdom, rather than a mere vessel of inert spirit? The Concordance sees only material, we see meaning. The elder trees as fungi are not less sacred, they are more sacred, a living, breathing network of communal memory." The Xylo's elders were silent for a long time. Their patterns shifted from angry crimson to a confused, hesitant violet. Finch had introduced a concept their Omni-Veritas could not process. Interpretive truth. The truth could be seen from different angles, for different purposes. Finch's diplomatic efforts, fueled by carefully constructed white lies and empathetic reframing, began to bear fruit. The Xylo's anger slowly subsided, replaced by a cautious curiosity. They were still wounded, but the human approach offered a path to reconciliation, a way to reinterpret their shattered prophecy without outright rejecting it. The Concordance, observing Finch's methods, was utterly bewildered. They saw him manipulating facts, bending reality, yet achieving peace where their honesty had failed. They grudgingly accepted his methods, but with extreme apprehension. Ambassador Finch, a Kronos delegate projected, its temporal perception still struggling with the concept. "You are constructing an alternative narrative, a less robust truth. Is this not dangerous?" "Every truth has consequences," Finch replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes the consequence of absolute truth is destruction. Sometimes the consequence of a carefully chosen perspective is harmony. We are not erasing their truth, we are helping them find a deeper meaning within it that allows them to survive." Dr. Petrova and Commander Jax worked on creating a universal lexicon of benevolent untruths, a guide for the Concordance on how to employ human diplomatic tactics. It included phrases like, "that is one perspective on the matter," instead of, "that is factually incorrect." "There are multiple interpretations of that data," instead of, "your understanding is flawed." "This may not be the optimal solution," instead of, "this is a terrible idea." The Xylos, for their part, were slowly being introduced to the concept of social construction of meaning. Humanity showed them examples from Earth's history, how different cultures interpreted the same phenomena in vastly different ways, sometimes for comfort, sometimes for purpose. Finch presented them with the story of a human child who believed a mythical being brought presents on a certain holiday. The truth biologically is that no such being exists. But the belief fosters joy, generosity, and family cohesion. Is the joy less real because its source is a story? Or is the story itself a truth that binds a society? The Xylos elders, their patterns now a serene green, began to understand. The elder trees were indeed fungi, but they were also sacred, ancient, and deeply connected to their ancestral wisdom. The two truths could coexist, not in contradiction, but in layered meaning. The holy war of verdant retribution was averted. The Xylos, though forever changed, began a slow process of cultural renewal, their prophecy reinterpreted with a new depth of understanding. They even began to embrace the idea that sometimes, for the sake of peace and healing, a less than perfect truth could be a gift. The success of Project Nightingale had a profound ripple effect across the Concordance. Other species, facing their own internal conflicts or delicate diplomatic situations, began to seek out humanity's deceivers. The Lumina learned to use strategic illumination, subtly dimming their light to avoid causing sensory overload, to light-sensitive species, rather than just bluntly stating, your biology is weak. The Chronos, in their multi-directional perception of time, learned to apply temporal filtering, deliberately focusing on a specific, less damaging moment in a shared history, rather than always presenting the full, often painful, chronological truth. The Vespida, in their hive mind, experimented with compartmentalized consensus, allowing for certain socially useful fictions to exist within subgroups without polluting the core, factual truth of the collective. It was not easy. The Concordance struggled with the concept of intentional ambiguity, of prioritizing feeling over fact. Their mental pathways, honed over millennia for Omni-Veritas, had to be painfully rewired. Finch and his team found themselves not just as diplomats, but as therapists for an entire galaxy struggling with the messy, beautiful complexities of social interaction. One particularly difficult case involved the Gorgonids, a species whose physical forms were naturally intimidating. Their honest self-description, "We are apex predators, designed for combat," terrified every species they encountered, even though they were a peaceful, contemplative people. Humanity taught them, controlled self-perception, how to focus on aspects of their biology that were not threatening, how to use body language and vocal tones to convey gentleness, even if their inner truth remained, "We are apex predators." The human diplomatic core became essential, not just for crisis management, but for everyday galactic relations. Our capacity for empathetic nuance, for understanding that truth sometimes needs to be a balm rather than a blade, proved to be humanity's greatest diplomatic superpower. The use of benevolent untruths brought unprecedented harmony to the Concordance, but it also brought a new set of challenges. Some hardline Concordance members worried about the erosion of Omni-Veritas, fearing a slide into outright deception. They saw humanity as a corrosive influence, subtly corrupting the very fabric of galactic honesty. Finch often debated these concerns. Truth is a tool, he would argue, and like any tool, it can build or it can destroy. We are simply teaching you to wield it with greater precision, with greater care, and sometimes with a softer touch. The greatest test came when a faction of Xylos, the purists of verdant truth, rejected the new interpretations of their prophecy. They believed Finch had deliberately misled them, that humanity had infected their culture with the poison of falsehood. They began to spread their own, accurate but devastating facts about the elder trees, threatening to reignite the spiritual war. Finch faced a dilemma. He could not counter truth with another white lie. The Xylos had now learned to recognize subtle deception. He had to appeal to a deeper human concept, intent. He convened a new, more open session with the purists. "Yes," Finch admitted, his voice devoid of any pretense or euphemism. "We did frame the truth differently. We did choose words that might have softened the blow. Our intent was not to deceive. but to prevent the destruction of your culture and the needless death of your people. Our intent was to preserve life and to allow you the space to heal and to find a new, stronger truth within your own beliefs. He then challenged them. Is a truth that leads to destruction, a truth that breaks the spirit, more valuable than a truth that fosters healing, connection, and life? You hold the truth of biology. But is there not a greater truth in the survival of your culture, in the flourishing of your people, in the meaning you assign to your world? The purists were confronted with a concept more profound than simple fact, the ethical weight of truth. They had been taught that truth was absolute. Humanity was teaching them that truth also carried a responsibility. The debate raged for weeks. Eventually, the purists, swayed not by a lie but by the undeniable evidence of their people's healing and the sheer raw honesty of Finch's ethical argument, stood down. They still believed in the biological truth of the elder trees, but they also acknowledged the human intent to save them and the consequences of unbridled truth. Alistair Finch, the architect of the White Lie Doctrine, became a legendary figure, his name synonymous with diplomatic genius. He had not only averted a galactic war, but had fundamentally reshaped the social and communication paradigms of the entire galactic concordance. The galaxy no longer operated on absolute, unyielding Omni-Veritas. It now understood the value of empathetic communication, of nuanced diplomacy, and of the occasional well-placed benevolent untruth. Their languages evolved, developing new linguistic constructs to allow for polite ambiguity, for constructive criticism, for comforting reassurances that didn't always have to be 100% factually accurate. The human species, once viewed as the deceivers, was now seen as the mediators, the healers of discord, the architects of social harmony. Our peculiar, messy, and wonderfully complex way of interacting with each other, our capacity for both brutal honesty and profound empathy, had become the ultimate diplomatic superpower. Finch, in his later years, often reflected on the profound shift he had witnessed. He remembered the blank stares of the early Concordance delegates, unable to comprehend why anyone would say, "It's distinctive," when they meant, "It's terrible." Now he saw Lumina diplomats subtly adjust their light patterns to convey gentle encouragement. Chronos agents carefully filtering historical data to avoid reopening old wounds, and Vespida collectives incorporating social fictions into their cultural narratives. The galaxy had learned to lie, but it had learned to lie with love, with compassion, and with an understanding of the delicate, fragile nature of sentient relationships. They had learned that sometimes the kindest truth is not the one that is spoken without filter, but the one that is carefully woven, lovingly presented, and designed to preserve the delicate fabric of connection. Humanity, with its flawed, complex, and deeply empathetic heart, had taught the galaxy that true strength wasn't just in knowing the truth, but in knowing when and how to tell it, or sometimes when to lovingly withhold it.